So you're in it, you're running it. Is it everything you thought you wanted to do as a CEO and being an entrepreneur when you were searching for it, or was it different?
I mean, at the risk of fence sitting, is probably a little bit of both. I I think I'll probably lean more towards it being different than it being kind of exactly what I had envisioned. And there's a couple of reasons why. The first is that, and I say this very frequently and very unapologetically, nobody knows what it's like to be an entrepreneur or CEO unless you have been one. Full stop. I had never been an entrepreneur or a CEO. So I learned an incredible amount about what it's actually like to run a small business. I would suggest that most people from the outside looking in tend to glorify or romanticize entrepreneurship and leadership. Once you have sat in the CEO's chair, you tend to almost snicker at those that glorify it or romanticize it. There are very, very rewarding and fulfilling parts of it, but it's also damn hard. It is very, very hard. So a couple of things that come to mind. Number one is the phrase that we've all heard, it's lonely at the top. That exists for a reason. And hiring more people, in my experience, doesn't really alleviate that. In fact, the bigger my company got, in some ways, the lonelier I felt as the CEO of the business. The second is that as a type A, overly ambitious overachiever, I think I over-indexed on the professional side of my life and neglected the personal side of my life, whether it's physical health, mental health, family, friends, balance, etc. Eventually, I came to pay a pretty big toll. And if I could, if I could do it again, I would certainly take a more balanced approach. What's unique to buying an existing company as opposed to starting one from scratch, and many acquisition entrepreneurs may say something similar, is that in some instances, it kind of takes a while for it to feel like your own company. I would suggest that for my first probably 2 years, maybe even longer, it kind of felt like I was just running somebody else's company. And the reason why is that even though this was an otherwise successful business, there was a lot of stuff to change, a lot of things to do. And I remember telling my wife and describing it as follows: said, it feels like I'm spending 2 years trying to untie a knot that it took somebody else 20 years to tie. Now, eventually we kind of did all that stuff. And eventually it absolutely felt like my own business. But I'd say in the first couple of years, it was a bit more challenging. And then the last thing I would say is, again, particularly in the early years, again, we'll go back to where we started our conversation, the seeming ridiculousness of the search fund concept, that this inexperienced young person can actually go in and do this thing. I think how that tends to manifest psychologically is in something called imposter syndrome, something that a lot of acquisition entrepreneurs feel. I certainly felt it. And that's, that can be a tough thing for an inexperienced person to deal with. So, thankfully, with the support of my board and my investors, I mean, we dealt with all this stuff. But this is, we're starting to encroach upon the territory of, what being an entrepreneur is really like, and the stuff that tends to not be discussed terribly frequently in our ecosystem.